So, the man who was deported to El Salvador and the Supreme Court has ordered the Trump administration to facilitate his return. Was he really an MS 13 member? I think a lot of what people think about this case is wrong, and I'll explain. Also, if those big, beautiful tariffs work and manufacturing does come back to the US, who, or should I say what, is going to be taking those jobs? And finally, how long does it take to spend COVID relief money? We have 16 attorneys general who are suing the Trump administration because he's pulling back a time extension. We'll talk about all of that coming up next. It has not been a great week for the Trump administration in the Supreme Court. There were two decisions regarding immigration. The latest one has to do with a man who was from El Salvador, and he was put on a plane. He was detained, and then he was put on a plane, sent to a prison in El Salvador. His family and his attorney have claimed that he had no MS-13 ties and actually had protected status in the U.S. The Trump administration has admitted that it was an administrative error that led to him being deported. And now the Supreme Court ruled 9-0. So this was a unanimous decision that the Trump administration has to facilitate his return to the U.S. But before we get too far into this topic, I know that we got to clear something up first, because most people are divided on the issue of whether or not this person was an MS-13 gang member. And actually, Caroline Leavitt, the spokesperson for the White House, was asked about this.
Case. First, I wanted to clarify something that you said to Jeff a few minutes ago. You said you'd seen evidence that this man was a convicted gang member. In what court was he convicted, and for what?
That is a fantastic question, because I have noticed that for most people, right, on the one hand, you have people who are like myself, who are arguing that he deserved, like everyone else, due process. And that is not an opinion, that is a legal fact. The Constitution requires that he have due process. And that is just the function of our Constitution. But I know when I've talked about this with other friends and colleagues, and we've talked about this on the radio as well, and the number one thing that people say is, yeah, but he was a convicted MS-13 gang member. And as a matter of fact, listen to this response from Caroline Leavitt.
This individual was an MS-13 ringleader. This individual was also engaged in human trafficking. And I'm glad you brought up this point again, because I would like to point out that if you just saw the headline from the insane, failing Atlantic magazine this morning, you would think this individual was Father of the Year, living in Maryland, living a peaceful life, when that couldn't be further from the truth. They didn't even mention in the title of that article, or even in the first paragraph, that this individual is an illegal criminal who broke our nation's immigration laws. He is a leader in the brutal MS-13 gang, and he is involved in human trafficking.
So I did not read the Atlantic headline, and as an attorney, I'm not going to get my facts from from headlines. What I will do is go back and look at some of the case history. So here is what we have. This is basic, kind of some of the facts that we have been able to garner about this man. So back in 2019, apparently the man did come into this country without documentation. And then back in 2019, I believe it was sometime around March of 2019 or February of 2019, he is standing at a Home Depot soliciting work, and he gets arrested. Apparently, there was an allegation made by an anonymous, unidentified person that this person was a member of MS-13, and that he was wearing a Chicago Bulls hat. So he gets detained. He then makes a claim for asylum, saying that no, he is not a member of MS-13, but rather he and his family were persecuted in El Salvador by MS-13, and that was why he was in the country. His family apparently had like a pupuseria, and they were being extorted by MS-13, which is exactly what they do, right? So he comes to the U.S. So there was actually a hearing, a full-on hearing, where the U.S. government had the opportunity to provide all the evidence to the immigration judge that as to why they believed that this person was an MS-13 gang member. He likewise also had an opportunity through his attorney to provide evidence that he was not. This is how our legal system works. This happened in 2019. Now, his asylum claim was actually denied, because you have to file asylum within a year. Generally, you have to file asylum within a year of being in this country. He did not do that. But based on the evidence, the judge found that he had a credible fear. Now, again, this is how our judicial system works, you guys. You get accused of something, whoops, you get accused of something, and then you get to face your accuser. They bring their evidence, you bring your evidence, and then a judge or a jury decides. In this case, it was an immigration judge. The judge found that based on all the evidence that the government was able to provide and all the evidence that he was able to provide, the judge believed him and said that he had a credible fear. So, although his asylum claim was denied because it was not within that year, he was still given protected status and protection from being deported from El Salvador. So, that's where the guy was when then apparently there was an administrative error. And I haven't seen any, elaboration from the administration of what that is. Now, again, this is me talking with my lawyer hat, okay? There was an administrative error that the Trump administration admitted to, and now this guy finds himself on a plane and deported to El Salvador. The Supreme Court has said, nope, can't do that because he has the right for due process, just like everybody else. And I know there are a lot of people that say that yes, but he came into the country illegally. I'm gonna shock the pants off of a lot of you when I tell you that the Constitution actually does provide due process to people who are here undocumented. Yes. And this is not a new thing, by the way. This is not a Trump thing. This is not a Biden thing. There is case law going back decades that highlights and reiterates this point that, yes, even people who are undocumented in this country have due process of law. So they get accused of something, then they have the right to defend themselves as well. The Supreme Court didn't say anything new. They just reiterated that. Now, so now that we have that fact, that's right. So there was the hearing, right, where the government had the opportunity to prove their case that he was MS-13 and they failed to do so. So who am I really mad at? I'm actually kind of mad at both parties on this. This is the fault of both Republicans and Democrats. First, though, I'm going to start with my friends on the left, Democrats. Yes, there is a huge part of blame that belongs to you. Because you know what I have seen, again, as an attorney who is working in this field as well, there are a lot of people who had a lot of misconceptions and beliefs based on American politics. Do you remember when we had a whole influx of migrants? This was not that long ago, y'all. A whole influx of migrants who were coming across the border undocumented with Biden t-shirts. Do you remember this?
Free for all at America's southern border. A group of migrants crossing into the U.S. were spotted wearing Biden, please let us in t-shirts. And while the White House refuses to call what is going on a crisis, a leaked memo says border agents are being overwhelmed. According to Axios, hundreds of unaccompanied minors are being taken into custody on a daily basis, and Border Patrol is struggling to deal with the skyrocketing number.
And that went on for decades, not the t-shirts. The t-shirts were pretty new. But this mentality, see, I talk to a lot of people who are in the immigration system, and there has been this mentality for a long time that, well, if you just come and especially with my friends on the left, this is a direct result of refusing to differentiate between people who are criminals. And again, for my friends on the right, see, look, there's a lot of blame going both sides. When I say criminal, I am not talking about the act of coming into this country undocumented, because that's a civil crime. I am talking about people who are here with undocumentation and then commit a crime, okay? A lot of Democrats have refused to make that distinction, which means what? Your refusal to make that distinction means that everyone gets lumped in as criminal. And that is devastating to the people who are just here, who have been here for years, decades even, who are working, paying taxes. Yes, a lot of them do pay taxes. And then we have the folks who really are truly gang members or they've committed some other crime and they should be deported. But there is a refusal to acknowledge that. And then for my friends on the left, there seems to be this mentality of it's almost like the if you build it, they will come. Like, well, if we get them to come, then we'll figure it out. knowing full good and well that there is no realistic path to citizenship for the majority of people who come to the US. Asylum claims get denied at a rate of about 90% because asylum, a lot of people think that asylum is something that you can just claim that, oh, I'm coming to seek asylum because of economic devastation in my country, or I'm just coming for a better life. That is most of what I hear from people. And while that is incredibly sympathetic, right? That is something that, yes, I understand a lot of people are coming to the US for a better life. An actual asylum claim has to be somebody who has a credible fear of persecution or death based on five specific things like race, nationality, you're in a particular political group, things like that, religion. So when people come here and they say, "Yeah, but I'm coming here for a better life," and I thought, I could just claim asylum, it's because we've been letting people believe that for years. So they come here, they make their asylum claim, and then it gets denied. Now, in the case of this gentleman, his was not the usual denial. It was a technicality because of a year, is what it sounds like. So that's kind of a different story. But what I'm saying is, to all my friends on the left who are upset about this, and there's a lot of reason to be upset about this issue. But what I am saying is that this mentality that we can just, ignore the rules, we can ignore the laws, and we can just allow people to come in and assume that eventually something will happen is part of the reason that these folks are finding themselves in a situation where now they are realizing, after they've been in this country for quite some time, that, oh crap, there isn't really a pathway? No. And we need to be more honest with people. But once again, it's about politics. Now, here's the really crazy thing. You got Republicans on one hand arguing X, Y, and Z. Then you got Democrats on the other hand arguing X, Y, and Z. Do you know what the American public is saying? I'll tell you. So there was a Pew Research poll back in April of 2024. So almost a year ago this time. And they found that 59% of voters believe that undocumented immigrants should be given a pathway to citizenship if certain things are met, certain criteria are met. So the majority of Americans, and that was backed up by a Gallup poll also in 2024 that said, and this one is specific to Republicans. Did you know that 64% of Republicans, according to this 2024 Gallup poll, 64% said that DACA recipients, the people who were brought in as minors, 64% believe that they should be given a pathway to citizenship. And that is Republicans. Now, how about all Americans? This Gallup poll showed that Americans in general, that number about DACA recipients shoots up to 81% believe that they should be given a pathway to citizenship. And citizenship, if certain requirements are met. So these are folks who've been in the country for a long time, requirements like no criminal record, paying taxes, things like that. 70% of Americans believe that they should be given a pathway to citizenship. So on the one hand, you've got Republicans saying this, Democrats saying that, and the majority of Americans are saying, I mean, honestly, if there was a set of criteria that people met, I don't care how they got here, then they should be allowed to stay. And that number skyrockets for DACA recipients. So you know what this is? This is an issue of politics. Politics over people. The American people are saying one thing. Politicians are saying something totally different. That's the real issue. If you're enjoying the show, make sure that you subscribe to Straight Talk with Eurypsy Morgan on YouTube at Y Morgan Show. Also, you can find us on iTunes and Spotify. It's been a wild week for the U.S. economy, but according to the Trump administration, everything is going according to plan. It's working. So, what happens if the president's big beautiful tariffs work and manufacturing does come back to the U.S.? Who, or should I say what, is going to take those jobs? Well, Secretary Treasurer Scott Bessent was actually on with Tucker Carlson recently to help us answer that question. Listen to
So
this.
you've obviously thought this through. You think that the United States has the necessary labor force for this transition?
I think we do. I think with AI, with automation, with so many of these factories are going to be new. They're going to be smart factories. That I think we've got all the labor force we need.
Interesting. So who or what is going to take these jobs. See, when this conversation about manufacturing happens, I think we've got two different ideas going on. On the one hand, I think there is a group of people who think that we will go back to a very, or maybe not exactly, but kind of a 1970s style of manufacturing, that there will be more jobs. That's the heart of this, right? Is that we want more jobs to come back to America. We want to make our own products, right? We found out during COVID, not making your own products can be really harmful. And then we want more jobs. We want good paying jobs. We remember what it was like in the 1970s when, dad would go off to work and they had these great union jobs and, everything seemed to be more affordable at the time. In the 1970s, about a quarter of the US workforce was working in manufacturing. Today, that number is less than 8%. So, yes, you're right. The numbers have plummeted. Um, but did you also know that according to, I'm going to get this right, according to job openings and labor turnover survey, there are about 482,000 open manufacturing jobs in America today. So if you want a manufacturing job, there are a whole lot of them available. In addition, there is an estimated number of about 1.9 million by 2033. So that number, like the 500,000, will jump to about 2 million by 2033. So where's this labor work? Where's this labor force coming from? If we do bring manufacturing back to America, then where are these workers going to come from? And you just heard there from Secretary Treasurer Scott Bessent, I don't think we're talking about people per se. AI and robotics, I think, will take a huge chunk of this. Now, let's back up a second, because I'm not saying that all of the jobs will be taken, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. But a couple of days ago, I was meeting with a friend of mine, and we were talking about some data that we were looking at. Right, we had been actually reviewing some statewide data, and it took me and my partner weeks. I say weeks. He's gonna laugh at me. It's probably months of him, combing through this data to get these numbers. When I was telling this to my friend, he was saying that he did the same thing. He and his group, and they had actually paid a consultant. And you can pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to get this data analyzed. So he was in his office and he was asking two of his staffers, like where are these numbers? How come we don't have these numbers yet? I want this data. And one of them is, I'd say maybe like really early 30s, young guy. And he, do you know what he did? He put it in Chat GPT, I think, and had the data in less than 10 minutes. Less than 10 minutes, people. So I have not gotten into the Chat GPT thing. I am not, I'm still, to be totally honest, I am just now getting onto Excel. It's just not my world. Although I do find Excel a lot more useful. But what I'm saying is that we are in a whole different world. And what manufacturing looked like in the 1970s is not what manufacturing is going to look like today. Already, you have companies like GM and all other kind of manufacturing plants that heavily rely on things like robotics and AI. So if we were to bring all of these manufacturing jobs, I don't think and the fact that we already have 500,000 open manufacturing jobs. Now, I do want to caveat that, because I am always a little suspect, of big numbers like that. So, these jobs probably have a wide range of the types of jobs that they are, where they are, right? So I think there is some nuanced 500,000, I think, can be kind of digest that number a little bit, right? Because it's kind of like saying, oh, there are all these jobs opening. Yes, but you have a law degree and the only job that's open is, let's say, at Chipotle. Okay, the job is open. I can understand why maybe you're not there. So I do want to caveat that a little bit, because there's not a whole lot of detail about exactly what these jobs are that I have seen. But let's just assume you've got all these jobs available. So if they do come back, you've got a U.S. worker that is going to require everything from workers' comp, laws and labor laws, and obviously salary and time off and benefits, and heaven forbid they get hurt, or you have these machines and these robots. Already, a lot of companies are already turning to AI and robotics to do the things much faster and more efficiently than a human being. I mean, that's just how it works. That's just how business works. So I'm not saying that all the jobs will be taken by machines. We're not, it's not AI robot yet. But here is my point on this, though. The types of jobs that will be coming back, that's what I think is going to be really interesting. And that's where I think we are grossly, grossly unprepared for those jobs to come back and the types of skilled labor that is needed. We use the term unskilled labor all the time as if, a monkey could just pick up whatever is being done, right? And the reality is that that's not the case. So, for example, these types of jobs that are coming back. I actually saw this CNN article about the types of jobs that would be available. Some of them, of course, would be like the software, data analytics, coding, things like that. So now you're talking about your engineers, your mechanical engineers, software engineers, the very data heavy, the very mathematics heavy STEM types of jobs, which require, in most cases, college degrees and higher education, right? And then you also have the repair and maintenance. Now, repair and maintenance, I think, is not as basic as it sounds. I mean, have you ever tried to repair a machine or a car, things like that? These things require certification and training. So my question is, if these big, beautiful tariffs work and we bring all this manufacturing back, and even if a good portion of those jobs are taken by AI and robotics, you're still going to have the type of workforce that can, one, do the software and the data analysis and all these sorts of things, but then the repair and the maintenance. And is our education system set up for that? No. And it hasn't been for a very, very long time. Sometime around the 1980s, we decided that the trades and vocation were going to be more of an elective as opposed to a legitimate, like equal form of work as going to college. And I get it. My parents were both immigrants, and the idea of going to college was, I mean, that was like the pillar. You come here to America, you work hard, your kids go to college, and they become doctors and lawyers, and that's what we do, right? And that's great. But somewhere along the lines, America as a whole decided that skilled labor and trades were going to be seen more as an alternative. It was going to be seen more as, couldn't get into college, so you're going to go into the trades. Or, well, you had to start working early, so you're just going to go into the trades. It became an alternative form of education as opposed to a legitimate, equal, primary form of education, which is crazy and in large part how we found ourselves in this mess. So how are we going to dig ourselves out if all of a sudden we are going to try to shift our economy in large part to more manufacturing domestically, more manufacturing plants? So we cannot see these as a form of simply alternative education. So I grew up in Texas, and back then, as my kids would say, in the late 1900s, but I was born in the mid 80s. Okay, so I'm not that old, but I'll tell you real quick. My husband just went to Home Depot. I asked him. I was making a little garden, and I need a certain type of planter, and I couldn't find the right one, the exact one that I had in my head, obviously. So I drew a picture for my husband, and I was like, "Hey, can you make this for me?" So he's at Home Depot right now getting the wood to make it. Here's a secret. Don't tell him this, but I could probably put the thing together myself because when I was in high school, they made us take agriculture and mechanics. Again, I'm from a little town in East Texas. I learned to weld. I learned to, do all kinds of stuff in the shop, and welding was actually super fun. Wood cutting was not necessarily my favorite, but if I had to, I could probably build my own planter. Now, to my husband's credit, his would probably last way longer than mine. There's a lot of stuff that I don't know about it. But my point is that back 30 years ago, 40 years ago, we still had more of an emphasis in things like vocation, the vocational trades. And now they are very much seen as simply an alternative to what we are now calling traditional education, right? Which is interesting because I think the other way around is more traditional. And so if we are going to bring back more manufacturing, then we already desperately need more tradespeople in America. If we bring this back, oh, you're absolutely going to have to ramp up the trades. And we've got to stop discussing things like welding and carpentry, masonry, all of these things as if, mechanics, as if these things are just unskilled labor. They're not unskilled. They're very much skilled. And we have to start treating them as such in our education system, or we're going to find ourselves in a situation where we have imported all these jobs and now we don't have anybody to work them. And our education system tends to be so rigid sometimes about, we're going to focus on STEM. Okay, great. But then it's like we put these blinders on and we ignore everything else. Or we're going to focus on that, we just to the detriment of everything else. I think this is also why you see a lot of frustration when it comes to DEI, because at a time when we already don't have enough people working these jobs and we've got kids that are graduating who complete sentences together. This is especially prevalent in some of our, like in Baltimore City. I live in Maryland. We won't even go into, some of the horrific math scores that we have seen coming out of the city. But it's not just the city. I'll just tell you this very quickly. My kids go to a school here in Anne Arundel County, and it was maybe 2 years ago, start of school. The principal brings in all the parents. It's like a back to school night, and they're showing us a graph of how great the school is in our stats. And I think we were top 5 for our math and reading scores with something like 35% proficiency. And I was like, excuse me? And I think the principal saw all the parents, like our eyebrows went up and he's, I know, that's really bad. And it's like, wait, so we're top 5, hooray. But with like 35%, I don't remember the exact number, but it was really low. And what I mean is that we have got to revamp our education system. And when we have arguments about things like DEI and those sorts of issues, I think that's why you see so much frustration, because the reality is while we're having conversations about, I don't know, 47 genders or whatever it is we're making up these days, other countries are vastly surpassing us in terms of jobs, education, all these things. And then we want to bring manufacturing back to America, but we are not going to have the workforce and the workforce with the right education to be able to do these jobs. So our next focus, or our current focus then, should be back to education. I'm in the car a lot, and to keep from being bored, I just listen to stuff on iTunes and Spotify. And now you can catch this show. You can subscribe to Straight Talk with Europe C. Morgan on YouTube at Y Morgan Show, but you can also find us on iTunes and Spotify.
Governor Josh Shapiro is joining 17 states in suing the Trump administration to restore access to pandemic relief aid for schools. Last month, states were notified that the Education Department would not honor deadline extensions for the funding, and schools were supposed to spend the last of the relief by January. Shapiro claims that the decision is unlawful, saying schools were promised that money for HVAC upgrades, classroom supplies, and mental and academic support. The Department of Education did not say how much money is left of the total $189 billion Congress.
Why are we still talking about COVID funding for schools? Okay, so you just heard there from that report that let's back up a second, right? Do you remember back in 2020, 2021, 2022, when our schools were reopening? And yes, I still have a chip on my shoulder because Maryland was the last state to reopen schools for in-person learning, last in the nation. Everyone else was doing it. We could not figure it out because we were scared of our own shadow. And so there was a ton of money, billions of dollars, as you heard there, that was set aside by the federal government for schools to reopen. But it was set aside for not just things like PPE. They were set aside for all kinds of things. And there was a deadline by which those schools, the states, were supposed to spend that money. Wait, can I just say, it is absolutely insane to me. For governments, especially like Maryland, we cannot hold on to a dollar to save our lives. We have a $3 billion deficit in this state, and we've had to raise taxes. I don't care what Governor Moore says. He knows good and well. He has raised taxes on residents, and we can't seem to hold on to a dollar, yet it's really taken you this long to spend millions of dollars. That's insane to me. It doesn't make sense. But here's the thing. So back during COVID, we set aside all of this money for the states to reopen schools, but there was actually more of, I'll tell you exactly where that money was supposed to go. And then there was a request for an extension because they said the money isn't going to be spent in time. Can we have an extension? And so the Biden administration, so Congress set aside the money. Okay. Or Biden then decides that he wants to give them an extension. And so they get the extension for through March of 2026. All right. So they're not able to do that. The Trump administration then decides that no, that extension, we're not going to uphold that extension. So guess what? The money goes away. Maryland is set to lose $418 million in promised COVID relief funds. New York State is going to lose $134 million. So I get why they're pissed. Like, don't get me wrong. I understand why the states are very upset about the COVID relief money going away. If I thought I was going to get $400 million and all of a sudden it's going away, yeah, I'd be pretty upset too. But as a taxpayer, as a resident, what's going on? Like, one, why could you not spend this money? And two, also as a taxpayer, we never answered the question as to did we need to spend this money? So that's, as a taxpayer, we just never seem to get the answer to that. It's always, well, we set this money aside and they wanted this money, but we never really answered the question of did we need this money? So this money, in New York specifically, they're saying that the relief funding has supported things like repairs and improvements to school buildings, the purchase of library books, playground equipment, and wheelchair accessible buses. Okay, all those, they're great things, but what in the heck does that have to do with COVID? Remember the purpose of this money. The reason that this money was set aside was during COVID. This is COVID relief money, and yet we're using it for playground equipment in New York State. Okay. Do you see why we can never get anything done here? Do you see why there's no trust in the government? Because you're telling me on the one hand that it's for COVID relief. The purpose of this was to reopen our schools, I thought, to make sure that our kids could get back to in-person learning. The HVAC systems, hey, look, I'll buy that. There are plenty of areas, and particularly here in Maryland, it's not just Baltimore City. Anne Arundel County has these issues too, with terrible HVAC systems, with lack of proper ventilation, mold in places, from as I've heard from other educators. So yeah, and like some of these things are rational, but it's like we took COVID and made it an excuse to just give away money, like open the coffers, and we slapped COVID on the name of all of these projects and said, there, we should be able to pay for it because it's COVID, knowing full good and well that this was not intended for COVID relief, but rather just a lump sum that we felt like giving to teachers. And it's not even to teachers. See, if it was going to the actual teachers, to the actual classrooms, I would be more on board with this. A lot of this came down to the union arguing for this money. And where did that money go? Well, it wasn't for COVID relief. Now, in some states, for example, we've talked about that this was intended to help kind of ease some of the learning loss, because, taking kids out of school, keeping them out of school, and then telling kindergartners that they needed to learn online on a computer like they did my kid was absolutely bonkers. And the numbers of children who stopped going to school and did not come back was greatly expanded. The learning loss that was expanded, right? We've got kids in pivotal years, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, who have not caught up. And so tutoring, right? A lot of this money was supposed to go to tutoring. So those kinds of things I would be more on board with. But playground equipment, I want you to have a playground just as much as everybody, but it was COVID relief money. And if we don't start being more, I think, attentive to where this money goes, then this is why politicians do this. This is why they just slap a label or a great name. This is another good example. A great name on a terrible bill and then expect taxpayers to fund it because it has a great name. That's exactly what went on here. Oh, well, we called it COVID relief, so that means we could give the schools millions of dollars and we shouldn't question where it's going. And now these attorneys general, 16 of them, are suing the Trump administration saying, nuh-uh, Biden gave us that extension, therefore we should get that extension. Meanwhile, I'm like, wait. Never mind the extension. I still want to have the conversation about why you got this money in the first place and whether or not we should have been spending this money. All right? That's the real issue. Should we have been spending this money in the first place? And the truth is, no. Our country is so broke, are trillions of dollars in debt. And we decided at that time, remember the heavy influence of Randy Weingarten and all the other union members, which again, I think are very different from the day-to-day in the classroom teachers. I know at least for my kids' classrooms, their teachers didn't see those millions of dollars. I mean, heck, in my kids' class, we've got 32 kids crammed into a classroom, and we're being told that we don't have enough funding, even though we pay insane amounts of taxes where I live. We're being told that we don't have enough funding for a teacher. So that money, I have not seen it go into a classroom. The teachers, I don't think, in large part, have seen that money go to a classroom. And yet you have these states' attorneys generals that are suing, saying, we need more time to be able to spend it. Okay. Well, I can't believe that you haven't figured out a way to spend the money. Normally, they're pretty good about burning through cash. But like I said, we never answered the question about why we spent this money in the first place. This lack of management, this mismanagement of funds is why America finds itself trillions of dollars of debt, in trillions of dollars of debt already. And the fact that there is little to no accountability about how this money is being spent, why it hasn't been spent yet. Oh, and the fact that our kids aren't doing better. Okay, that's the real issue here. Our kids are not doing better. We still have massive amounts of learning loss. We still have massive amounts of division between the Black, white, Hispanic students only grew further apart. And we said that during COVID, right? If you close down schools and keep them closed, then those gaps are going to increase. And guess what? They did. They have, and they haven't stopped. So if we want to talk about, extensions, I don't want to have that conversation. I want to have the conversation about where this money went, why we spent this money in the first place. And if you did get so much money, why do we still have so much learning loss in American schools? Thanks for listening to Straight Talk with your Ipsy Morgan. We got some exciting stuff coming up, so make sure that you subscribe on our YouTube channel and invite your friends and family to do so too. You can also find us on iTunes and Spotify.